Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed? Have you ever trusted someone completely only to have them turn their back on you? Maybe a friend, a colleague, or even a leader you admired. It stings, doesn't it? It makes us question everything. But here's the thing. Betrayal doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's always a reason, and if we want to prevent it from happening again, we need to understand why it happens in the first place. Trust is the most valuable currency in any relationship, whether personal or professional. It's built over time, through consistency, honesty, and a shared sense of purpose. Trust isn't about words, it's about actions that prove again and again that we have each other's backs. But here's what most people forget. Trust is fragile. It can take years to build and seconds to destroy. Trust is the foundation of all relationships, whether personal or professional. It is the invisible thread that binds people together, creating a sense of safety, belonging, and shared purpose. Without trust, relationships crumble, teams fall apart, and organizations fail to thrive. While it takes years to build trust, it can be destroyed in a matter of seconds, often by a single act of betrayal or dishonesty. This fragile yet essential component of human connection determines the strength and longevity of relationships. Trust is not just about believing that someone will do the right thing, it is about consistency, reliability, and integrity. People do not trust others simply because they say they are trustworthy. Trust is built through repeated actions over time. When someone consistently shows up, keeps their word, and demonstrates genuine care, trust begins to form. It is not an overnight process, but a gradual one, built through experiences that reinforce the belief that this person or organization is dependable. In a professional setting, trust is the glue that holds teams together. A leader who fosters trust creates an environment where employees feel safe to express their ideas, admit mistakes, and collaborate without fear. When trust exists, productivity soars and innovation flourishes because people are not wasting energy protecting themselves from judgment or manipulation. Instead, they focus on the shared goal, knowing that their contributions are valued and their well-being is a priority. On the other hand, when trust is broken, the effects can be devastating. A single lie, a breach of confidence, or an act of deception can erase years of goodwill. Once trust is lost, rebuilding it is far more difficult than establishing it in the first place. People become cautious, questioning every action and motive, unsure if they can ever fully believe in the relationship again. This is why betrayal cuts so deep. It not only damages the present relationship, but also makes it harder to trust others in the future. The process of rebuilding trust requires effort, transparency, and patience. It starts with acknowledging the breach, taking responsibility, and demonstrating through actions, not just words, that lessons have been learned. Apologies alone are not enough. Trust is restored when the person who broke it consistently proves their commitment to change. The key is improving reliability over time, showing through actions that the mistake will not be repeated. In personal relationships, trust fosters emotional intimacy and security. Whether it is a friendship, romantic partnership, or family bond, trust allows people to be vulnerable with one another. It means knowing that someone will be there when they are needed, that promises will be kept, and that words spoken in confidence will not be used against them. Without trust, relationships become strained, filled with doubt and suspicion. Trust also plays a crucial role in business and leadership. Customers trust brands that consistently deliver on their promises, employees trust leaders who act with integrity, and teams trust colleagues who support and uplift them. The most successful companies are not just those with the best products or services, but those that earn and maintain the trust of their stakeholders. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that trust is permanent. It is not something that once established remains forever. Trust must be nurtured and reinforced daily through honesty, dependability, and ethical behavior. The moment trust is taken for granted, cracks begin to form, and relationships become vulnerable to collapse. Trust is a choice, both in giving and receiving. It requires courage to trust others, knowing that there is always a risk of betrayal. However, avoiding trust entirely leads to isolation and missed opportunities. The key is to be discerning, to build trust gradually, and to recognize that while trust can be broken, it can also be rebuilt with the right effort and intention. In the end, trust is what makes relationships meaningful. It allows people to work together, support one another, and create lasting connections. Whether in personal life or business, those who prioritize trust will always find stronger, more resilient relationships that stand the test of time. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions that drive human behavior, and when people feel threatened, their natural instinct is to protect themselves. In many cases, betrayal is not an act of malice, but a reaction to fear. Whether it is the fear of losing status, security, or opportunities, people often make choices that prioritize their own survival over loyalty to others. Understanding how fear influences betrayal can help us navigate relationships, build stronger connections, and prevent unnecessary breaches of trust. Fear comes in many forms. In professional settings, employees may fear losing their jobs, missing out on promotions, or being left behind in a competitive environment. When fear takes hold, self-preservation becomes the priority, and people may start making decisions that serve their interests rather than the collective good. They might withhold important information, undermine colleagues, or align themselves with those they perceive as more powerful, all actions that can be seen as betrayals. In personal relationships, fear of abandonment or rejection can drive people to betray the ones they care about. A person who is insecure in a relationship may seek validation elsewhere, leading to acts of infidelity or deception. A friend who fears social exclusion may distance themselves from someone they were once loyal to just to fit in with a new group. These betrayals are often less about the person being betrayed and more about the betrayer's own insecurities and desperate attempt to avoid pain. One of the most common fears that lead to betrayal is the fear of scarcity. When people believe that resources, whether money, love, opportunities, or recognition, are limited, they feel compelled to secure their share before someone else does. This is why competition can sometimes turn toxic, leading people to act dishonestly or step over others to get ahead. If someone betrays a friend for a promotion or takes credit for a colleague's work, the driving force is often not cruelty, but a deep fear that they will miss out if they do not act selfishly. Another powerful fear that causes betrayal is the fear of failure. People who are afraid of being seen as weak or incapable may shift blame onto others, throw teammates under the bus, or withhold the truth to avoid consequences. Instead of admitting mistakes, they distance themselves from responsibility, sometimes at the cost of relationships and trust. This kind of betrayal is particularly damaging because it not only fractures trust, but also creates a culture of fear where no one feels safe to be honest or vulnerable. Leaders who fail to address fear within their teams often see higher levels of betrayal and disloyalty. When employees feel that their jobs are at risk, that failure is punished harshly, or that they are constantly being evaluated, they operate from a place of survival rather than collaboration. In contrast, leaders who foster a sense of security create environments where people feel safe to be honest, to support one another, and to act with integrity, even in difficult situations. The key to preventing betrayal driven by fear is to create an environment where people feel secure and valued. Open communication, trust-building measures, and a culture of fairness can reduce the anxiety that leads to self-serving behavior. When people believe that their needs will be met, that they will not be unfairly punished for mistakes, and that loyalty is genuinely rewarded, they are far less likely to act out of fear. At a personal level, recognizing fear as a root cause of betrayal allows for a more empathetic response. Instead of immediately assuming malicious intent, it is worth asking, what was this person afraid of? What insecurity drove their actions? While betrayal still hurts, understanding the underlying fear can lead to more productive conversations, opportunities for reconciliation, and ultimately stronger relationships. Fear may drive people to betray, but it does not have to. When we create a sense of security in our relationships, both personal and professional, we reduce the likelihood of fear-driven decisions. By focusing on trust, fairness, and open dialogue, we can build environments where people feel safe enough to act with integrity rather than desperation. Betrayal is often not a result of bad intentions, but rather a consequence of misalignment. When two people or groups start with shared goals and values, trust forms naturally. However, over time, priorities can shift, ambitions can change, and perspectives can evolve. When alignment is lost, loyalty often fades, and what once seemed like a strong bond can break apart. Understanding misalignment as a cause of betrayal allows us to navigate relationships more wisely, preventing unnecessary pain and fostering deeper connections. In personal relationships, people often assume that loyalty is permanent. Friendships, romantic relationships, and family bonds are expected to last forever. But that is only possible when both sides continue to share common values and goals. When two friends grow in different directions, perhaps one prioritizes career while the other values adventure, they may no longer relate to each other in the same way. This does not necessarily mean one person has betrayed the other, but rather that their paths are no longer aligned. The same can be seen in romantic relationships where people change over time. If one partner seeks stability while the other craves freedom, a rift forms and one may make choices that the other perceives as betrayal. In professional settings, misalignment is a common reason for conflict and perceived disloyalty. A company and its employees may start with a shared vision, but as the business grows or changes direction, some employees may no longer feel connected to its mission. If an organization prioritizes profits while an employee values ethical leadership, the employee may feel betrayed and in turn may act in ways that the company sees as betrayal, perhaps leaving abruptly or exposing internal flaws. Likewise, if an employee's career goals no longer align with the company's opportunities, they may look elsewhere, even if they were once highly dedicated. Leaders often struggle with misalignment when they assume that employees or team members will remain loyal simply because of past commitments. However, true loyalty is not based on history alone. It is based on an ongoing sense of shared purpose. The moment an employee feels that their contributions no longer matter, that their values are being compromised, or that their growth is being stifled, they will begin looking for better alignment elsewhere. If a leader does not recognize this shift in time, they may feel blindsided by an employee's departure or actions. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that betrayal is always personal. In many cases, people are not acting against someone, they are simply acting for themselves. When someone leaves a job for a better opportunity, ends a relationship that no longer serves them, or prioritizes new friendships over old ones, it may feel like a personal attack, but in reality, it is often a natural consequence of changing priorities. The pain of betrayal is sometimes just the pain of realizing that what once worked no longer does. The key to preventing misalignment-based betrayal is maintaining open communication and regularly reassessing shared goals. In relationships, this means having honest conversations about expectations, values, and future plans. In business, it means ensuring that employees, partners, and leaders are continuously aligned with the company's mission and making adjustments when necessary. When people feel heard and included in decisions, they are less likely to disengage or act in ways that feel like betrayal. Misalignment is not always avoidable, but how it is handled determines whether it results in betrayal or simply a natural transition. Instead of holding on too tightly to relationships that no longer align, it is more productive to acknowledge the shift and find ways to part amicably when necessary. Not every relationship is meant to last forever, and not every departure should be seen as a betrayal. By recognizing the role of misalignment in shifting relationships, we can let go of resentment and approach changes with understanding, growth, and acceptance. One of the biggest reasons people betray others is not because they are inherently disloyal or malicious, but because they do not feel psychologically safe in their environment. Psychological safety is the sense of trust and openness that allows individuals to express their thoughts, admit mistakes, and share their concerns without fear of punishment or humiliation. When people feel unsafe, whether in a workplace, friendship, or romantic relationship, they often resort to secrecy, avoidance, or even deception as a means of self-protection. Understanding the role of psychological safety in betrayal can help us create environments where loyalty is strengthened rather than broken. In workplaces, psychological safety is essential for collaboration, innovation, and trust. When employees feel that they can speak up without being ridiculed, they are more likely to be honest about challenges and mistakes. However, in environments where criticism is harsh, mistakes are punished severely, or leaders foster a culture of fear, employees may begin to hide the truth, manipulate situations to their advantage, or betray colleagues to protect themselves. If someone is constantly afraid of losing their job, they may act in ways that seem disloyal, such as shifting blame, withholding information, or aligning themselves with those in power instead of standing by their team. Consider an employee who makes a mistake, but fears that admitting it will result in severe consequences. Instead of owning up to it, they cover it up or place the blame on someone else. This might be perceived as betrayal by their colleagues, but in reality, it is a reaction to the lack of psychological safety. Had the environment been one where mistakes were treated as learning opportunities rather than punishable offenses, the employee might have been more willing to be honest. Psychological safety is just as important in personal relationships. When people feel safe to express themselves, they are more likely to be open about their needs, fears, and struggles. However, when a relationship is built on judgment, control, or fear of abandonment, one or both individuals may begin to keep secrets, suppress their true feelings, or seek validation elsewhere. A partner who feels unheard or constantly criticized may withdraw emotionally, leading to betrayal not because they wanted to hurt the other person, but because they did not feel safe being vulnerable within the relationship. Friendships can also suffer from a lack of psychological safety. A friend who feels judged, unappreciated, or excluded may slowly distance themselves, form new bonds elsewhere, or act in ways that appear disloyal. They might not share important information, avoid difficult conversations, or turn to others who provide the emotional security they lack. This type of betrayal is often more about seeking safety than about intentionally hurting someone. One of the most damaging effects of a lack of psychological safety is the erosion of trust. When people do not feel safe, they develop a defensive mindset. Instead of working together, they look out for themselves. Instead of being honest, they say what they think others want to hear. This creates a cycle where relationships become transactional rather than built on genuine care and connection. When trust is weak, betrayal becomes more likely, not because people are untrustworthy by nature, but because they are trying to protect themselves in an unsafe environment. Preventing betrayal caused by a lack of psychological safety starts with fostering an atmosphere of openness, trust, and non-judgment. Leaders can encourage psychological safety by making it clear that mistakes are part of growth, listening to employees without immediate criticism, and promoting collaboration over competition. In relationships, creating a safe space for honest communication, free from harsh judgment or retaliation, helps both individuals feel secure enough to remain loyal and committed. When people feel heard, valued, and safe, they have no reason to seek security elsewhere. They are more likely to remain honest, stand by those who support them, and build relationships based on trust rather than fear. Psychological safety does not just prevent betrayal, it creates an environment where loyalty, honesty, and connection can thrive. One of the most effective ways to prevent betrayal is by building what Simon Sinek calls a circle of safety. This concept is rooted in the idea that when people feel secure, valued, and protected within a group, whether a team, organization, friendship, or relationship, they are far less likely to act out of fear or self-preservation. Instead, they become more committed, loyal, and willing to work together for the greater good. The absence of this safety net, however, leads to distrust, competition, and eventually betrayal. In any group, whether a business team or a close-knit friendship, there are external threats: uncertainty, competition, changing circumstances that create pressure. When individuals within that group feel that they are truly supported, that they won't be punished for making mistakes, and that they are valued for who they are, they will put their energy into strengthening the group rather than looking for security elsewhere. However, when people feel exposed, unprotected, or undervalued, they start prioritizing their own survival, which can manifest in behaviors that others perceive as betrayal. In a workplace, a leader who builds a circle of safety ensures that employees feel secure enough to focus on their work without constantly worrying about their jobs or reputations. This means fostering an environment where people feel heard, where they know their contributions matter, and where they trust that their leaders will protect them from unnecessary stressors. A company that cultivates this kind of culture will see employees who are loyal, honest, and engaged. On the other hand, in companies where employees feel replaceable, undervalued, or at risk of punishment, people will begin to act in ways that serve only themselves. They may hide mistakes, withhold information, or even betray colleagues to secure their own positions. One example of a strong circle of safety in business is a company where leadership takes responsibility for failures instead of placing blame on employees. When leaders shield their teams from unnecessary threats such as sudden layoffs, public humiliation, or unrealistic expectations, employees develop a deep sense of trust and loyalty. They feel safe enough to innovate, collaborate, and put their best effort forward. But when employees fear that admitting mistakes will cost them their jobs or that they will be replaced at the first sign of trouble, they start making choices that prioritize their personal survival over the team's success. The same principle applies to friendships and relationships. When people feel emotionally safe with someone, they are more likely to be honest, vulnerable, and committed. They do not have to constantly guard themselves or seek validation elsewhere. A strong friendship, for example, is built on trust that neither person will betray the other, speak negatively behind their back, or abandon them in difficult times. However, when one friend starts to feel like they are being taken for granted, left out, or not valued, they may begin to pull away or even form new connections that feel safer. In romantic relationships, a circle of safety means creating an environment where both partners feel secure in their bond. This means open communication, reassurance, and mutual respect. When a person feels like their emotional needs are consistently ignored, they may seek comfort elsewhere, not necessarily because they want to hurt their partner, but because they do not feel safe enough to express their true feelings within the relationship. Many betrayals in relationships happen not out of malice, but because one person feels isolated and unprotected in the relationship. Building a circle of safety requires intentional effort. Leaders must show that they prioritize people over short-term profits, ensuring employees feel valued and secure. Friends and partners must communicate openly and create spaces where honesty is encouraged without fear of judgment. When people feel truly safe within a relationship or group, they do not feel the need to act selfishly, secretly, or deceptively. Instead, they invest in strengthening the bond, knowing that their security lies in their connections rather than in self-preservation. In the end, betrayal is less likely to occur in an environment where people feel truly safe. By focusing on trust, fairness, and protection within any relationship, we can create spaces where loyalty thrives and where people have no reason to seek security elsewhere. The stronger the circle of safety, the stronger the commitment, unity, and trust among those within it. One of the most painful aspects of betrayal is that it often comes from those we least expect: friends, colleagues, loved ones, or trusted leaders. However, what makes betrayal even more frustrating is that sometimes the people who betray us do not even realize the full impact of their actions. This happens because people often justify their behavior in their own minds, convincing themselves that they had no choice, that they were protecting themselves, or that what they did was not really a betrayal at all. Understanding this psychological tendency can help us process betrayal in a more constructive way, and even prevent it from happening in the first place. Humans have an incredible ability to rationalize their actions. When faced with a difficult choice, most people want to believe that they are still good, ethical, and fair, even when their actions contradict those values. This is why someone who betrays a friend may tell themselves, "I had to do it because they would have done the same to me." Or, "I wasn't really betraying them, I was just looking out for myself." A colleague who takes credit for someone else's work may justify it by thinking, I've worked just as hard and they don't deserve all the recognition. A partner who is unfaithful may convince themselves that their significant other was neglecting them, making their betrayal seem like a justified reaction rather than a choice they made. This mental process is called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort we feel when our actions do not align with our values. Instead of admitting wrongdoing, many people will unconsciously change their perception of reality to protect their self-image. They convince themselves that their betrayal was necessary, unavoidable, or even fair. The more someone feels guilty about their betrayal, the more likely they are to justify it in ways that make them feel like they were the victim rather than the one who caused harm. One of the biggest reasons people rationalize betrayal is self-preservation. When people feel like they are in danger, whether it is losing their job, damaging their reputation, or facing an uncomfortable confrontation, they may act in ways they never thought they would. Instead of admitting that fear drove their decision, they tell themselves a story that makes their actions seem reasonable. A manager who fires a loyal employee to cut costs might tell themselves it's just business, even if they know deep down that it was unfair. A friend who shares a secret they promised to keep might convince themselves, I didn't mean any harm, it just slipped out. Another reason people justify betrayal is shifting blame onto others. Instead of taking responsibility, they look for ways to frame the other person as the one who was at fault. This is common in relationships where betrayal occurs. A partner who cheats might say, well, if they had paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have done it. A friend who distances themselves might think, they were being too clingy, so I had to do what was best for me. By shifting blame, the betrayer avoids feeling guilty while making it seem as though their actions were a response to someone else's behavior rather than their own decision. This understanding does not excuse betrayal, but it does help us see that most betrayals are not as intentional as they seem. Many people who betray others do not wake up in the morning planning to do harm. Rather, they find themselves in a difficult situation and justify their way out of the guilt. This does not mean betrayal should be tolerated, but it does mean that when we are betrayed, we can choose to respond with understanding rather than immediate retaliation. Recognizing that people justify their actions can also help prevent betrayal. In leadership, fostering a culture of honesty and accountability can make people feel less inclined to rationalize unethical choices. In friendships and relationships, open communication and mutual understanding can reduce the chances of someone feeling the need to make a decision they later justify as necessary. The more people feel heard, supported, and valued, the less likely they are to act in ways that require them to convince themselves they did nothing wrong. Ultimately, betrayal is often more about the betrayer than the betrayed. People justify their actions to protect their own self-permission, even if it means causing harm to someone else. Understanding this does not take away the pain of betrayal, but it does allow us to see it for what it truly is, an act driven by fear, self-preservation, or misaligned priorities, rather than a personal attack. When we recognize this, we can move forward with greater clarity, set better boundaries, and focus on building relationships with those who are willing to hold themselves accountable rather than making excuses for their actions.